We're excited to have this outstanding panel on today. They're people who work particularly in this area of STEAM that we're talking about for science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And so without further ado, I want you all to join me and welcome me to the platform. We have Ramona Williams, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Jobs for Mississippi Graduates. We have Malcolm White, who is a Mississippi Arts and Entertainment Consultant. Dr. Ralph Didlake, who is Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and the Director of the Center for Bioethics and Medical Humanities at UMMC. We also have Dr. Jermaine McConnell, Executive Director of the Mississippi School of Math and Science. And then last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Cameron Ball, who's a Senior Manager for Education and Government at C-Spire. So we're glad to have all of them. Let's give them a thunderous applause. And I told them I would make this easy on them. I think we heard a lot of the things that Dr. Steve Perry kind of talked about in terms of making a sacrifice, and he talked about technology and education and so many other things. But I wanted to start them off to warm them up just a little bit about any reactions that they may have had to some of the things that he talked about. Of course, we don't endorse all comments. One of the reasons of bringing us all together is we all have thoughts and opinions about everything. It doesn't mean that any one way is right. Everybody has a perspective, but I'm curious to know in terms of your reactions to some of the things that he talked about.
I'll be glad to start.
All right, Dr. McConnell.
One of the things that stood out to me that he stated was the issue of money in education. And yes, you know, a lot of school districts, a lot of schools in this state need more money. But I can also point to certain instances where money was not the issue. It was not, you know, something that was going to help solve the issues. I won't state that particular school district, but I was a teacher there. And this particular district was under state conservatorship, had all the money that it needed, but whenever you do not have the right systems, processes, leaders in place, I don't care how much money you throw at the situation. And so we have to be careful about that. And so I do like the idea of we do need to hold all of our schools and school districts accountable. And I think in large part that's up to our school board members, who I would say are a big part of the problem of public education in Mississippi.
Any other reactions?
Well, I'm here to represent the A in STEAM, and so what I will talk about is the opportunity to use the arts as a teaching tool, to always incorporate the arts, to have the arts at the table. And what I noticed about Dr. Perry is he talked about how all children don't necessarily learn the same way. He talked about different schools, different kids, different teachers, different curriculums, and that's what we talk about when we advocate for having more arts in schools, is that every child does not learn the same way. Not every child is a rote memorization learner. Not every child does well on tests. Does that give them a buy on test? I suppose not. But using the arts is a tool that we often say in schools we can't afford. We will do away with an arts teacher long before we'll do away with a basketball coach. We'll do away with an arts lab a long time before we will do away with cheerleading squads. Is one right and one wrong? That's not necessarily the choice I'm asking people to make, but I will say that we have to remember that all of us are created differently, we all act differently, we all have different backgrounds and experiences, and my friends, we all also learn differently.
Ramona?
Mm-hmm. I'll just add that as a community-based organization that seeks to reduce our state's dropout rate and prepare our young people for the next level after high school, that as a community-based organization, indeed, we are the least of them. And I took Dr. Perry's remark to say, and to challenge me as the Executive Director of Jobs for Mississippi Graduates, to make certain that we are about educating our young people and that we are ensuring that we're making the requisite sacrifices to ensure that they are successful. For as our students go, so does our state.
I would agree. I find many of Dr. Perry's comments very compelling, and I think he and I would agree about the destination that we need to get to. I'm not sure we would agree exactly on the journey, on the path to get there. I'm a strong supporter of public education, and although I would not be opposed to a pilot of a voucher system, I don't think it's the answer to all disparities that we have experienced as a state, and I think we need to be very circumspect about whether or not a voucher system is just another type of disparity in the making.
One of my takeaways from Dr. Perry's remarks was his sense of urgency. And I think that that's something that we are lacking at times when we speak about education in Mississippi. As a former school teacher and district administrator for 20 years, I come to this conversation with a background based in trying to improve schools. And one of the things that I really felt like resonated with Mississippi was his remarks about how we fix it. I think that for too long we've looked outward, and I think that as educators it's time that we look inward. And we have to understand that we can no longer look to funding, resources, legislators, consultants, experts to help us fix our problems. We've got to get together and we've got to look to our community and develop a sense of urgency together and figure out how we're going to take the hard steps to improve the opportunities for educating our children. And we've got to agree that that has to be our number one priority.
And I would say in order to do that, it takes courage. It takes courage for administrators, for instance, to make the right decisions about who's in the classroom. I mean, a lot of times, especially if you're in a smaller community, the school board member has family members who are in that school. And so a principal or superintendent has to make a decision. Do I have the courage to make this recommendation, to do the right thing? It's easy to say that we care about the children and we're doing what's in the best interest of children. But when you start to really look at the underperforming districts and the rhetoric that's used, it doesn't really measure up with what actions individuals are taking. Because all of us know of those teachers, or you've known of those teachers who did not need to be in the classroom. But yet, year after year, everybody's saying the same thing, that teacher does not need to be there. But why are they still there? And so in order to make the real changes, what it takes is courage.
All right, so these were all great opening comments by our panelists. And I want to shift to something. Dr. Perry kind of talked about stats. So I'm not going to harp on in terms of what percentages I'm about to say, but I think it really is a good transition as we really start talking about STEAM. Of course, our theme this year is integrating STEAM to engage all students for science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And the most recent PISA results, and these were actually from 2012, so they may have some other ones even now, but these stats place the United States in unimpressive 35th out of 64 countries in math and 27th in science. And then among the states in the U.S., Mississippi was ranked among the worst. And so all of you all are operating in careers, either in the business community or in the education community, or even in arts and entertainment, that you're looking for some of these students to eventually grow up and have careers in your areas. How do we change that, and what are your reactions to this stat that really talks about not only the United States, but Mississippi being among the worst as it relates to students, their rank in terms of math and science? And that's to anybody who wants to answer that.
Well, I can start because my institution is absolutely dependent on quality students coming in. Our mandate is to provide a qualified healthcare workforce for the state. We are completely dependent on what we used to call STEM, highly qualified science and technology students, but what we have found is that we can educate healthcare providers of all types, whether they be physicians or dentists or nurses, who understand the technical components very well, but if they don't have a human engagement component to them, they're not the best providers that we can generate. So I am delighted to embrace the new STEAM concept, because what it provides for us is a qualified student who's prepared for a rigorous healthcare education, but has the background to be able to engage at the human level and understand that every patient they see comes to them not with just a disease, but also an illness. That is the way they experience that disease. And that's full of human context. And we can't divorce one from the other and have the best type of student that we can have. So we are critically dependent on the whole STEAM concept.
If I could, I'd like to follow up on that and just say that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but I have read enough to know that the brain basically has a left and a right side, and that certain things generate and originate in those sides. The left side of the brain is where arts, creativity, innovation, joyfulness, and play, and pieces that make up that side of the brain. But also in that side of the brain comes empathy and sympathy. And if you think you can train a physician or a nurse practitioner to simply understand how to read machines and have no ability to engage with the patient, you're not going to be successful. One of the things that the arts brings to the medical profession are life skills and one-on-one skills, and in these powerful things called empathy and sympathy. If you literally cannot understand another man or woman's plight in life, I highly doubt that you're going to effectively be able to treat them, nurture them, and care for them. This is another role that the arts play. When we integrate arts into our studies, into our education, we also build on and amplify empathy and sympathy.
Dr. McConnell?
Yes, I don't want to speak too much, let the other panelists speak. I think one of the issues and one of the challenges that we have, not just in Mississippi, but throughout this country, is going to be the teachers who can make a real difference. Teachers who have the necessary knowledge and skills that are needed. And so, it's almost like we get into this cycle. We need better teachers, but in terms of the state of public education in Mississippi, where do they come from? I've been blessed to serve previously as co-director of a program called the Mississippi Teacher Corps. I was a member of the Teacher Corps who taught in the critical needs district. And it's extremely difficult to find individuals who specialize in math and science to go in some of your most needed areas, not just to go there, but to stay there. And now I'm blessed to be a part of one of the best schools in America. We have some of the greatest faculty members at the Mississippi School for Mathematics and Science. But we get students from all over the state of Mississippi, a lot of them from areas where they just can't find qualified teachers to teach those upper level courses. And that's the role that we fill. But it does scare me. Even when I look for a math teacher for our school, it's getting more and more difficult. When I'm searching for that science teacher, it's getting more and more difficult. And so I think it's important for all of us to identify those young people early. I tell some of our math teachers, we do a lot of outreach. When you identify those kids who have this natural gift of interacting with children and teaching them a particular concept, start encouraging those kids to go into education. And so I think we do education a disservice by not promoting it enough to young people. We say, oh, you need to be the next scientist. Well, you can still be a scientist and be an educator. And so I think we have to change that conversation to ensure that we get the best and most qualified individuals going into education.
And so I wanted to, go ahead, Cameron.
I'd like to add, at C-Spire, we are the nation's largest privately held wireless cell phone company. And we also are very proud that we are deeply rooted here in Mississippi. Our company started in Butte and Meadville, Mississippi. And we are very aware of the importance that STEAM plays in the future of the landscape of our state. So much so that the company and our foundation has invested over $30 million in Mississippi much of which has gone to education. We partner with groups like Kids Code Mississippi, which is trying to push computer science and coding into our classrooms at an earlier age to engage children in the importance of understanding computer science, because as important as reading and mathematics are today, the jobs that our second graders and third graders will have much of them will be dependent upon technology and engineering and mathematics. So we also understand that as we're rolling out our nationally acclaimed Fiber to the Home program, we need fiber technicians, we need engineers to help make that transform our economic development throughout our communities, transform our lifestyle, transform the opportunity to have broadband into our homes in communities all over the state. But we need those highly qualified technicians to take those jobs. And so by engaging in new curriculum, supporting the Mississippi Department of Education and their work to engage computer science into the secondary classrooms, we really see that link between public education and economic development as one that's vital, and STEAM playing a huge part in that as we move forward.
So Cameron, you really kind of pushed me toward the next area. You talked about the jobs and the skills that you mentioned, kind of like first graders and second graders and what they're doing. We already know that some of the jobs of the future are not around right now. So even when we look at jobs for Mississippi graduates, and Ramona, I was going to direct this one to you, how has your organization been a catalyst for change in preparing students for even some of these jobs of the future and making sure that they're college and career ready? We talk about that and we hear about it all the time, but what really does college and career ready mean for jobs that don't even exist today?
I'm so glad you asked me that question. With our program, we seek to expose the young people and to make them aware of what careers are available in the areas of STEM. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We seek to introduce them to even the very entry-level jobs that require them to have the math and science skills that are needed. We work with our young people so that they are exposed to the various careers and know that if they want to aspire to be nurses, doctors, engineers, that they need to make certain that their grades in the math and science classes are great grades. We work with them with our college tours to take them to our various engineering schools across the state. We have representatives on our board of directors from UMC to Ingalls to Nissan who are actually employers of STEM areas. So with our program, we're seeking to expose as well as to put the young people on career paths in the areas of STEM.
Okay, and so I'll direct this follow-up question to Malcolm and Dr. Didlake. What do you all see in terms of career trends in your areas for the arts and the sciences and for health that we can help better prepare students today for those opportunities that will be available tomorrow?
What we have seen is a trend toward a more holistic model of healthcare delivery. The Affordable Care Act has brought with it this move toward what's called a patient-centered medical home, where it's no longer a vertically structured delivery system with the physician at the top and, say, the pharmacist down at the bottom. It's now a horizontal relationship where there's much more of a team approach. And within this team approach, new skills are called for. And to give you an example of how critically we're feeling that is going back to Hippocrates, we pretty much knew what medical professionalism looked like, or thought we did. But in these new models, professionalism has a completely different feel and tone and skill sets with it. So we find ourselves having to teach people to communicate better, to listen better, to be more deeply engaged in the life of their patient and the life of the provider working next to them. So these are the kinds of new skill sets. They're not just technical. Clearly, genomics and big data mining and those sorts of things are out there as new scientific and technical skill sets that our people need. But they also need really new human skill sets as well.
Malcolm?
In terms of a job specific job careers in the arts, you all sort of know the big job. You know the famous artist, you understand that, but only a very small number of people who participate in the arts end up in a arts career. And I'm not saying that we do not want to move more people toward a creative career, an artistic career, and we do. Mississippi creates more creative Americans than any other state in the union. We can rattle off a list of famous people. They're famous not because they're celebrities, they're famous because they're very creative and they've accomplished great things in entertainment and the arts, theater, writing, literature, all of that. But the main thing that I want to address is that the importance of the arts is not about building artists for the future. It's about exposing everyone to the creative side of their brain. It's about making better doctors. It's about making better teachers. It's about making better parents. It's about making better grandparents. It's about being a whole person. A whole person has a whole experiences of their life that aren't just sort of traditional reading, writing, and arithmetic. This notion of adding the creative side is very beneficial, and particularly as we talk about jobs in the 21st century that we don't even know about yet. The arts teaches a person to be open to change and to not be fearful of things that they don't know about, to approach things that they are not familiar with an open mind, an open heart, and a curiosity. The arts teach curiosity. The arts teach collaboration, teamwork. If you've never been backstage at a theater production at a school, you think teamwork is on Friday night under the lights. And look, I'm an athlete. I played college football and high school football. But if you want to see teamwork, the great example of teamwork, you go backstage at a theater production at your high school and watch those kids and those teachers work together to deliver this seamless performance that the public sees. So again, my role here is to always say, what is the role of the arts and where do the arts fit in? And the truth is they fit into everything. They make a better whole person who is a better citizen, again, a better parent, a better teacher. So that's the way we see it. Whether they're specific jobs, there is no product that you buy, there is no product that you wear, there is no product in your life that did not start with design. And design, my friends, is the arts. Your car was designed by an artist. Your tie was designed by an artist. This room was designed by an architect. Your hair was designed by a hairstylist. There is not one thing that you participate in on a day-to-day basis that did not begin with design, creativity, and the arts.
All right, go ahead.
Can I just add that, I mentioned earlier that MSMS does get kids from all over the state of Mississippi. And the one thing that's consistent is that all of them face something different in terms of it being more challenging, more rigorous. And I always ask our students, as they come in after they've been there a few weeks or a month, and I say, I know things are a little bit more difficult and there's increased rigor, this word. So are you getting additional coursework or homework, or are they forcing you to think on a deeper level? Not one of them has said it's been because of the amount of work. It's been because we're teaching them to become critical thinkers. And I love the word that I heard of creativity. When we think about preparing our young people for tomorrow's jobs, when we think about it, how many kids go to college and change their majors? How many of you went to college, you thought you wanted to do something, and you changed your major? What we have to be focused on is helping young people to think for themselves. Creativity, and so that means the arts. And some people think about our school and they think, oh, you only teach math and science. But if you come and visit us, you'll see that we have one of the best performing arts teachers anywhere. one of the best visual arts teachers anywhere. And our kids are extremely creative, and they're very good, not just in math and science, but those other areas as well. And so all of that works together. Our mission is to meet their individual needs. And when you're talking about individual needs, you're not just talking about coursework. We have to work on developing young people and meeting their needs, which really helps them across all areas.
All right. So we've kind of been talking up here, but we do want to give the opportunity for anybody in the audience to ask any questions of our panelists. So we'll give a few moments for anybody who may have questions. Is that a hand? I wasn't sure.
Hey, Dr. McConnell, this is Duncan Gray. How you doing? Good. You touched on a subject that we heard earlier. I wanted you to sort of follow up a little bit on that. You know, we've all kind of addressed or acknowledged, I guess, there are some educators who probably need to be removed from the classroom, removed from administrative positions. You also talked about the balance, though, especially in the small communities, both being products of the teacher corps. We know about teacher shortage. How do we balance those two? How do we reconcile, you know, the issue of the teacher shortage with, you know, knowing that we need to remove some?
You know, I'm not a proponent, and I think he said it earlier as well. You can't just fire all the people in a district and think you're going to get results. You also have to work with people. And I think there has to be an understanding, and there has to be a culture established by administrators that says, look, you know, I want you to get better. I'm coming into your classroom because I want you to get better. And you know, when I first came to MSMS, gosh, I can't say too much because I don't want to put some people out. I told them, I cannot brag on you if I don't know what you're doing. And I was telling them, I will be in your classroom constantly, but I don't want you to change what you're doing. I want you to be who you are. And so over time, they began to feel more comfortable with me just dropping in their classroom. And I think there has to be a culture established that it's okay to admit where your weaknesses are. And that's really up to administrators to help establish that relationship and that level of trust, because teachers need to be able to tell somebody, I need help with this. But as administrators, there's always this gotcha moment that you're using this to get rid of them, then the level of trust is broken. So I believe in giving appropriate feedback, but at the end of the day, if they can't do it, you have to make that tough decision. Now, any administrative position is political. Let's be honest about it. And so you have to do things in a way that you're always as respectful as possible. But also, I tell a lot of people this, it can never be about you as the individual. You have to stay focused on what's best for the school and what's best for the organization moving forward. And that's a little bit easier for school board members or whoever to swallow when you're focused on it being about the school and the students moving forward rather than it being about the individual. But there's no easy answer to it.
Any other questions from the floor? Okay.
This is Sally Gray. I'm with Parents for Public Schools, and I have a question about who in Mississippi, if you know, who in Mississippi is doing STEAM well. We've been talking about STEM for a long time, and middle schools and high schools are, you know, putting together STEM labs and so forth. But now that we've added the A to STEM, I'm just curious if there are particular models out there of schools or districts that are doing that well that could be leaders for other districts.
Well, thank you. I think I'm going to jump in and answer. I'm excited to answer this one because I have most recently joined C Spire less than a year ago. The previous 5 years I spent in the Clinton Public School District, and if you want to see a good example of STEAM, go visit Clinton Public School District. One of the things that we implemented there was the state's first district-wide one-to-one initiative, which meant that every child in the district received a digital device. Kindergarten through 4th graders all have an iPad. 5th grade through 12th grade all have a MacBook Air. And every teacher and administrator received a MacBook Pro for a year before the students did, so that they could receive training and have an opportunity to get comfortable with their device and develop curriculum and instruction around integrating technology into the classroom. In addition to that, Clinton Public Schools, under the leadership of Dr. Philip Birchfield, superintendent, and Brett Robinson, the Career and Technical Education Director, have started what's called a Career Pathways program, so that students as early as 8th grade begin identifying what area they're interested in for a career path and can start just having those conversations. And all of the high school courses and junior high courses that they have are wrapped around that concept. So there may be health and human services career pathway where they're still having to read the same amount of literature that possibly the STEAM pathway is, but in health and human services they may get to actually read a John Grisham novel where somebody else is reading something that leans more toward engineering. And then lastly, if you haven't gotten a chance to see Attaché perform or hear the choral music production, the arts is beautifully integrated into the school district there in Clinton. Their show choir is phenomenal. And I think it's a beautiful, as Malcolm has said earlier, he played high school and college football, it's a beautiful representation of how you can marry the two. They don't have to be one or the other. Often you'll see the quarterback for the football team or a star baseball pitcher or the cheerleading squad are standing front and center and singing beautifully and dancing, performing beautifully in their attaché production. So I would encourage you to go visit Clinton if you haven't had a chance to do that. They do a fabulous job of excelling across the board in science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics.
We have time maybe for one more question.
Could I
Oh, go ahead, Malcolm.
One more example. Casey Elementary School here in Jackson is an arts integrated program. They've had great success for a long, long time. Madison Station out in Madison County has long integrated and used the arts and believes in the arts. And neither of these two schools had to add the A to STEAM, that they already use the arts. But there are many programs around the state where the arts have never been taken out. Unfortunately, in many instances, arts are the first thing to be eliminated because of budgets. And somehow it became acceptable that the arts was the easy elimination, and it has been in many places. But check out Madison Station and Casey Elementary for two more examples.
Could I give one more example from the other end of the spectrum? In our graduate school at the Medical Center, we have a cohort of PhD students in physiology, microbiology, and biochemistry. Every year I read with them Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle, which is a novel about scientific responsibility. So it can happen at any point along the educational spectrum, and it doesn't have to be a complex program. It can be something as simple as an embedded learning activity, such as reading a novel, into an existing curriculum.
And very quickly, I'm going to throw two more at you. Corinth Public School District and Clarksdale Public School District, both places where they're integrating technology beautifully and the arts as well.
All right. One final question from the floor. There's one in front of you.
Hi, my name is Yolanda Kirkland. I have a question about, in some of the school districts, there's trouble with finding teachers that can teach the subject effectively. And I work in the community, so we try to keep kids motivated in schools. But I heard someone mention that when you find a child that's interested in mathematics, you have to find a way to really get them into it and keep them motivated. Even in the area of arts, And because of some of the difficulty in the schools, students are a lot of times not exposed to that. What can we put out there for them that can help? We know that it's different programs during different times, but consistently, what can we do as a community to assist students that are interested in mathematics, but the school may not have someone that can teach them the math effectively?
I would suggest that you look at your business community. There may very well be an engineering firm. There may, I'm sure, be hospitals with medical personnel who have an accruum for mathematics that could mentor that young person. Your banking industry, I'm sure there are personnel there in the banks who have an accruum for math, to where you can partner that student up with a mentor from the business community that could help them increase their learning and their expansion of the math knowledge that they have.
And I would like to say that there's this idea that I have called community learning, and that's a term I made up, which simply means that in the old days, we used to engage the entire community in the learning process. Today, we exclusively leave that role to the schools. And the parents rarely go, and the community rarely goes into the schools, and the schools rarely go out into the community. I think where power exists is when the town and gown meet, when the community and the school come together, and when the children hear a lesson plan out in the community, whether it's at the library or at the Little Theater or at some function at church. If there is a way that the community could become aware of where the children are learning and to integrate that sort of conversation, mentorship, internships, proteges, there are a million ways, but I think we've gotten into this sort of mindset that education belongs solely in the classroom and in the schoolhouse, and that the outside world is the outside world. I think that's a real problem. I think we need to knock those walls down and to think about community learning so that the whole community is responsible for a child's education, not just the principal, not just the teacher, not just the school. And that's not an easy thing to do, but it is something to think about.
I would give two pieces of advice. First of all, there's so many options available online right now. Afterwards, I'll be glad to sit down and talk to you. But also, let's not underestimate, especially depending on the age of the student, the power of a peer mentor, such as somebody that may be at the high school level who could help to mentor, who has a great interest in mathematics, that they could mentor that younger student as well.
All right. So as we close out our panel for today, I'm going to give any of you all, if you want to have closing comments, what would you say, 30 seconds or less, to wrap this up in terms of STEAM and integrating STEAM to engage all students? If there's anything else that you would like to add, we'll start with you, Ramona.
STEAM is a way of life for all of us, from our smartphones to our laptops. For our young people, they are already there. It's just a matter of exposing them to the various areas in STEAM and ensuring that they know what's available as an adult to be successful in STEAM.
And I would just say in parting that let's take the example of the great Jim Henson from Leland, Mississippi, who created the Muppets and Sesame Street and so many other entertainment educational programming, that we should not leave any component on the table. Often technology, broadcasting, things like the internet are very important partners to go with that very human experience of the child and the instructor. So I think it's including all technologies, including the arts and innovation in order to, and again, the community as well, in order to give each child a possibility of a leg up, a possibility of an opportunity for a better life.
Again, the medical center is wholly dependent on the state being successful in this regard, generating students who are ready to learn and who are broadly based, who are qualified to understand the technical components and the human components. There is nothing less than the health and the future of our state depending on that.
This is not a new concept, but encourage teachers across disciplines to talk to one another. The more teachers are able to help students make connections, the better. We have to stop looking at this in isolation in terms of the different courses or the different areas. But the more teachers talk and really help students bridge the gap, I think that's where we're really going to begin to see the benefits.
One of the things that I have loved about working at C Spire is that there's a little aluminum stick man on the wall in every conference room. And I got the opportunity early on to ask what that was. And the story goes that at some point our CEO drew a stick man on a dry erase board to remind a group of individuals that at all times we need to remember the customer in the room with us. And if you've seen the C Spire commercial, you know that C Spire stands for Customer Inspired. As a classroom teacher formerly, I think that one way we can really move Mississippi forward and bring STEAM into that journey is to keep the student at the center and to be student inspired in every decision that we make, in every budget choice that we approve, in every partnership that we develop with our community, and in every conversation that we have about moving Mississippi forward. We can't leave the child out of that conversation. And we have to have, as Jermaine said earlier, we have to have the courage to make those difficult decisions, because if it's not good enough for your child or your grandchild or your sister or brother or niece or nephew, then it shouldn't be good enough for any child in Mississippi. We've got to make sure that classrooms are well equipped, that teachers have the resources that they need, and that administrators have a path to follow for curriculum, with resources, with partnerships, so that we can see the potential that STEAM has for Mississippi. We can see that actualized.
Join me in thanking all of our panelists for being with us on today.